everybody. I am Dr. Grace Lorden, the host of Workforce, a podcast that blends behavioural science insights and work insights that is produced by the awesome Decibel Creative. You have picked a good bonus content to dip into. We are here talking office fridge politics, and in particular, I am talking to Christina Clark. At this particular moment in the bonus content, I am asking her about status symbols in the office, and in particular, whether we now still want a big office in order to confer high status in today's post-COVID world, where more people than ever are working somewhere between the office and at home. Let's hear what she has to say. Is fridge politics still relevant today? Because I guess a lot of companies have moved towards kind of hybrid-based working, where a lot of people are coming in on the twat day, so Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, working at home Monday and Friday. And maybe when they're in, they're not as invested in some of these symbols of the office as they were pre-COVID.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's also true. I mean, I think there are lots of offices that are probably sitting fairly empty, given that they're moving to a kind of more of either a hybrid or a fully remote approach. And I would say that the main thing there is. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there, Grace. I'm hoping that Buckets will cut this out.
They will. You could start again. So it's really asking: is fridge politics still relevant today? Now that we're in this kind of hybrid working mode? Yep.
Excellent. Thank you. Take two. I think it's probably still a bit relevant because obviously the office is not dead. I think that even if we're moving to a hybrid mode, people are going to be back in the office. But I think probably there's still this element of half of your colleagues will be deciding to have an al desco lunch with something that they've bought from the shop outside, or the other half might be bringing something in from home. So I think it's you're not even really fully committed to the fridge anyway, but definitely still relevant, just probably a bit less so than before.
I'm thinking about the office, that there are a lot of offices that are empty now, but it seems that there's a reluctance among some people to kind of give up their big office space, even though they don't use it a lot. What does that say about that type of person in the workplace?
I think it's interesting about the people that are reluctant to give it up, because I mean in a way it's sort of all about brand and having this sort of particularly in London your location says a lot about what kind of a company you want to be, and so even if there are not a lot of people in there, it just feels like a lot of waste, really. My feeling is that things will evolve, but it's going to take a while, I think, until people fully identify what it is that makes their cultural symbol important. And it might not necessarily be location. I'm hoping that we'll move past kind of location as a real big power symbol, as it would be for big firms like for instance Bloomberg. They've got an amazing location in central London, huge amounts of fridges everywhere for journalists and visitors of journalists to go in and help themselves to whatever they like. And this is a real kind of symbol of power. A bit like Google, as well, back in the day, before they were letting go of lots of people. But I think this sort of brings to me as well, it raises a question around if we're saying that culturally, we look after people, and we do that by offering, these free fridges and free food and, yoga classes and whatever. But then when we let go of them, we don't do it in person, or their passes stop working, etc. Again, this is not sending a signal of respect for your employees. Mm-hmm. So I think the investment needs to be in those things and not in the buildings that house them. It needs to be in the way that we communicate with them and how we treat them.
So you're kind of questioning the historical reliance on things in the office to keep people in the office, really, when you say that.
Yes, exactly. I think we need to sort of really redefine what it is that, how we treat people from the minute that they walk in the door to the moment that they leave, because every employee will be, one of the greatest ambassadors for any company, whether they're a current or a former employee. They will go on and talk to their friends and, their networks about what their experience was. And, that saves on an awful lot of very expensive PR, if you can really get that kind of employee cycle, really sort of have them be your champions, even if they decided to leave you.
And if you were to think about the future of work and the move towards virtual, what are the type of things that what are the type of things that employers can do to make sure that people do feel welcome from the moment they walk through that virtual work door in the morning to when they leave in the evening?
Do you mean in a hybrid environment, or
in a fully virtual environment? So
fully virtual,
if you imagine people doing remote first, where very often they'll find themselves going into the office for a small bit, but that they will be on the screen, so their door then becomes virtual. What can the employers do to keep them motivated and make them feel that they actually belong?
I think one of the bigger things is trust. So, for instance, a great way to demotivate people is a sort of obligation of kind of regular screen time. And of course, you do want to be able to kind of eyeball people, but I think a bit of flexibility there as to how people are able to show up is also important. For that feeling of like, hey, I know that I'm being trusted to get on with my work and to deliver. And if there's a problem with delivery, then that's a different thing. But just really having those spaces to be able to check in with your teams, with your leaders, with your peers, having a kind of effectively an open, door policy at your desk, I think is really key to keep that flow of communication going. And also just a bit of contact with the kind of the senior leadership as well, because I think often when we're in offices, there can be a bit of a power distance, of course, in some of these companies. So you might not even approach the really the founder or the kind of C-suite around the organization. So perhaps even being able to kind of get, even if it's 15 minutes in the diary of one of these folks every so often, then that really kind of reduces that power distance and allows you to be able to ask questions about what's happening in the organization, making you more invested.
I love the idea of virtual roulette, where people are assigned somebody within the broader organization who they would never normally meet from any function, not just your own, to spend a virtual coffee of 30 minutes with. So yes. you get to know what are they doing, how are they motivated, because very often within the same organization, people are motivated by very different things, and ultimately kind of build culture capital where you otherwise don't get the opportunity to do that.
Absolutely. And I think that's a fantastic way of doing it, and it just keeps people picking up the phone to each other or opening the Zoom room, whichever way you do it best. And I think we don't need to be, we don't necessarily have to be limited to Zoom. Of course, the humble phone is fine too. So why not do that? Just as long as we are chatting and, working out what it is that, what are our challenges in every day, being able to ask those questions that really get past the roadblocks that then lead you to you being able to deliver really great work and even like innovate on the problem at hand. So that's very important.
So if we take, Christina, office-based workers, and I was to understand your vision for the future of work for office-based workers, what does it look like? And does office fridge politics have any part in it?
Well, I think office-based, I mean, my vision for office-based, folks, I think is really for flexibility, that you should be able to come and go, and that you should be able to, particularly for, women who want to have a bit more flexibility in terms of, having families, etc. And men too, of course, because there are men who want to be a part of that. My husband's a Dutchman. He's very, equal in the home as well. So we take charge equally of how we spend time with our kid. And that's really important to have that flexibility to be able to do that. So I think that's key. And then the second part of that, sorry, Chris, my brain is gone again.
Why don't you gather your thoughts and start again? Because the first part's really good, but just to allow you to bring it together. So it's really just asking you about your vision for the future of work for office-based workers, and whether the fridge politics has any part in it, or does it become extinct?
Okay. And the second part of that is that, I think it is really important that when we are in the office, that we do have a sort of kind of, if you like, hearth that we can kind of come together to have those exchanges that build those relationships together. And I think the fridge is still symbolic of that, in the same way that maybe a fireplace in a kind of Victorian living room would have been a gathering point for people. So this sort of idea of, bringing people together to share meals, to share stories, any snippets, is still a really big part of intel gathering in terms of what's happening, and particularly in like really big organizations. So I wouldn't suggest, replacing the fridge. I would just say, it's really important that we kind of have this sort of, respectful attitude towards it and use it as a gathering place to share stories, intel, expertise, and important data. Maybe even some failures of what's happening around the organization that people can learn from. I think that would also be a good thing to have.
So we should see it as a focal point for gathering rather than something that actually brings us together to have arguments, whether passive aggressive or otherwise.
Absolutely. And that maybe that's just the office microwave, but that's probably a whole other podcast episode.